Have you ever heard the expression that you're trying to save face in a situation? Well, that's all generated from the face negotiation theory that Ting Toomey illustrates. The concept of face, it's not particularly about your face, but rather face is the projected image of one's self in a relational situation. So it's essentially a metaphor for your public self-image. It's how you think people see you. Okay, and whenever they're talking about face work, that's all the verbal and nonverbal activity that you do in order to try to either regain face, save face, or diminish the loss of face. There are two driving paradigms that create our concept of face: the collectivistic culture or an individualistic culture. These cultures are the driving forces behind how we view and create the concept of our face. Okay, a collectivistic culture is where people identify with a larger group that is responsible for providing care in exchange for group loyalty, the we identity, and this is usually found in high context cultures. Also, the individualistic culture, which is the opposing to collectivistic, is where people look out for themselves and their immediate families and have an I identity. So the collectivistic culture is the we, where you're looking at the broader group and you're saying their good is more important than my personal good. The I identity, which is the individualistic culture, is where you're saying the I, or my good, is better than the overall good. And when I say good, I'm not saying this is good or bad, and I'm not passing judgment. This is just merely an example of where we would just think it's totally normal to be an I identity type of individual. It would be where we decide, well, I want to be a professor when I grow up. Well, that's actually an example of the I identity, because if I was in a we identity culture, a collectivistic culture, I would only do what my mother and father did. So that's an example of how the individualistic culture manifests, and it's not per se in a selfish way. It just is different than having the we as your driving force and motivator. Okay, but we need to recognize the fact that while the American culture is more, the tendency is to be more individualistic, 2/3 of the world is collectivistic. Make sure you look at the chart in the book to identify what's what. Okay, so the two different identities that I was just mentioning in regards to the individualistic and the collectivistic cultures are, first, the I identity. The I identity is linked with the individualistic, and it's concerned with self-face. So in a situation, it's where you would choose to make sure that you didn't look stupid or ridiculous or whatever, instead of possibly the group. Okay, we identity is linked with the collectivistic culture and way of thinking, and it's concerned with other face or mutual face. So an example to illustrate the difference here is if a group of you were asked to build a house of cards in class, and there was one student who did nothing, no work at all, or they knocked over the house of cards, whether it was intentional or not. If your response to the teacher would be to say that, to tell the teacher about the one student's detrimental contribution to the group, you would be more individualistic. If your response was that we weren't able to complete the task due to various reasons without naming names, you would be more collectivistic. Okay, So the reason why this all comes into play is because it manifests itself in the ways that we engage in conflict. So there are 8 major ways. Avoiding, which is withdrawing from open discussion. Obliging, which is accommodating or giving in to the wishes of the other in the conflict. Compromising, which is conflict management by negotiation or bargaining, trying to seek that middle way. Integrating, which is problem solving through open discussion, collaborating for a win-win resolution of the conflict. Dominating, which is where you're competing to win when other people's interests conflict with your own. Okay, the next way is through emotional expression, which is managing conflict by disclosure or venting of feelings. Now, the funny thing about this is emotional expression has a tendency to not be with the person that you're actually angry with. This might be considered like gossiping, but you know how you're really angry or upset with someone and you call a friend and you're just like, I just need to vent. Well, you're not actually venting to the person with the issue that you have. You're venting to someone else. That's emotional expression. Okay, passive aggression. Passive aggression, or when you're seeing, witnessing, or actually engaging in passive aggressive behavior, is when you're making indirect accusations, showing resentment or procrastination, and other behaviors aimed at thwarting another's resolution of the conflict. So it also has a tendency to manifest with misplaced anger. You could be totally really mad about something else, but yet all of a sudden you get on them about the dishes. And you're not really angry with them about the issue that you're really angry with. You're just picking on other little things because it's misplaced anger. So that's passive aggression, or one manifestation of it. Or the last way to deal with conflict is through third-party help, which is finding a mediator or an arbitrator or some kind of neutral and respected party to help aid resolving the differences that you have. Okay, these 8 different styles of conflict have a tendency to, if you look at page 407, you're going to see a different chart that helps lay them out. And what it'll show you is that the collectivistic cultures have a tendency to be obliging, avoiding, compromising. They seek third-party help, and they also are integrating. Some of these are obviously more positive than negative, and some of them are very negative, unproductive ways to engage in conflict. But also look at the individualistic side. Passive aggression, not very productive. Emotional expression, that can go either way. And dominating the conflict. So it's very interesting to see the different ways that our styles of conflict are generated based on our perception of how we engage. So keep reading the book. See if you can actually witness somebody trying to save face, or when you notice someone has lost face,